Pamela Moan, thanking the people who make public radio great every day, and also those who listen.
This is 94.9 KUOW, Seattle's NPR news station. It's 12:06. Here's Bill Radke with Week in Review.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to Week in Review. This is the time of week when we huddle with local journalists and work out what happened this week and what it means. And I'm so happy to have stranger editor Chase Burns with me. Hey, Chase.
Hey, Bill. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. That's right. First show back together. Fox 13 reporter Jennifer Lee. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
Great to see you. Northwest News Network and KUOW correspondent Anna King. Anna, pleasure to see you too.
Great to be here, Bill.
And we are recording this program live on Friday at noon Pacific Standard Time. Standard Time, the best kind of time there is.
It's the same thing that Arizona, Hawaii, all the territories have. It's the natural time defined by the sun. It's best for our sleep and our health.
That is amateur astronomer JP this week, supporting a bipartisan group of state lawmakers who want us to quit changing our clocks back and forth twice a year. Ditch daylight saving time and stick with permanent standard time. Chase, is this actually going to happen?
I don't know. I feel like it's sort of Groundhog Day because we keep coming back to this issue and we keep not being able to do it. I have a hard time deciphering between Pacific Standard Time and daylight savings time. I don't know. I feel like I have to look it up like 17 times every single year to know the difference. I am just in support of anything that means we don't have to change the clocks every however many times a year we have to do it.
Got it. The D battery problem or whatever that thing is called. Anna, would I just free associated, change clocks, change smoke alarm batteries. I hope I would do it without the clock change. Anna, would Eastern Washington go along with this? Would they secede? Would they create their own conservative time zone? What do you think?
I think
Reagan time?
Basically, like, you know, the ag workers out here are on the sunlight time. You know what I mean? So like we get up and beat the heat, especially in the summertime. Many farm workers are heading to work at like 3:30 or 4 in the morning, and they're stopping by Mexican bakeries, getting a couple pastries for the road, and then they're out to the fields and they have maybe a 45-minute drive. So I don't think time is really relevant in the same way out here. Like we rise with the sun.
Wow, that sounds so old timey. But you're in Richland. I mean, you're saying that's a real significant east-west difference.
Yeah, I mean, we go to work when it's not hot and when we can do the work outside. And when I'm saying we, I guess I mean many Eastern Washington folks that are working either at Hanford or working in the fields where they are really exposed to the elements.
Yeah. Jennifer, why should we continue to have daylight saving time if people are just going to call it daylight savings time anyway? It's not working.
See, I think being consistent is helpful. I mean, like my organized mind likes to think like everyone on the West Coast will follow like the same time, but I wonder if we change, like, won't that be confusing as you're traveling from like state to state even more? But I don't know. I kind of like having the extra sun in the summer for sure, but it is weird when I'm waking up close to like 8 in the morning and it's still dark outside. So,
well, if they propose creating extra sun, I would vote for that. If we wouldn't just shift the clock, we would actually create more sunshine. I would be on board. Let's get into the news of the week here. Speaking of confusing, since you just mentioned that word. What about schools this week? Did your child go to school? Maybe the answer took even you by surprise because some parents got little notice before their schools went remote or canceled classes because of a lack of staff, occasionally a lack of students. Jennifer, why didn't districts just decide to go remote for, say, 2 weeks and then evaluate from there? Why the day-to-day mystery, pop-up mysteries?
I know it's like ping pong, but you're literally like unsure who's going to get the ball here. And I think it was really frustrating for a lot of families because you're literally like on the edge. Like, are we going or are we not? are we getting lessons or is school just closed? And like, for example, Kimball Elementary School here in Seattle, I mean, they were first closed earlier in the week and it was a day-by-day case, like you said. But although I think switching back to remote is probably easier now than it was at the start of the pandemic when all the educators were starting from scratch, I do think there's like a level of challenge that's also different with the elementary level learning aged kids, as opposed to high school where, you know, those students are older, they're able to actually have their own self-study days in the beginning. And for example, at Lake Washington School District, the first 2 days of remote, the students were pretty much on their own while the teachers were preparing lessons to be remote starting on Wednesday. So I think it's just the structure of learning that is very challenging to coordinate. And also, schools don't want to be remote if they can help it. But obviously, there's a lot of absences happening on both the staffing and student level.
Yeah. Chase, is this the way it's always going to be, you think? Or at least, you know, as far as we know, the pandemic's going to be unpredictable for a while. Is this the thing?
I think we're in a unique Omicron phase. And so as long as the cases are rising and they're still looking like they're rising, I think that we're going to keep seeing this kind of stop and go approach. But with the, you know, with the student protests that are being talked about over the next week and with the potential sick outs that students are talking about in the Seattle area.
Would you say more, Chase, for those who don't know about some students are sort of threatening a strike? They want safety protocols, et cetera.
Yeah, and so some classes that have gone remote, they're coming back on like Tuesday, they're expecting to. And there are certain safety protocols that they're asking for. They want more testing in the schools. They want boosters to be more available. Specifically, they want more masks to be available. You know, we talked like a week ago, the governor said that we got a bunch more masks that are going to be distributed to, community centers, to schools. And I spoke with a freshman this week who wrote a guest editorial for us who was saying like, you know, we haven't seen the plans on when those masks will be distributed. So a lot of students feel generally unsafe when they're going into school settings, not just students, also teachers. And so there's like a varying list of demands depending on the schools and depending on the students. And so you have different groups that are talking about potentially doing sick outs or protests and not going into school. I do think that those are going to force us, along with the rising case counts, to think about making a more uniform decision. I know that school districts kind of have their hands tied. KUOW has done reporting on this about how basically they need the public health department to provide a recommendation that the school district as a whole should go to remote for a certain amount of time. I think we're kind of nearing that as we have all of these scattered cases. And I just, when you talk to students and when you talk to parents, they're asking for just some clarity. Like, we knew that Omicron was going to hit a huge case count. We're seeing that the research is the predictions are being borne out. And so I think we just need to, a lot of parents are confused. You know, they're like, why are we still guessing every single day? And I bet if we met next week, we would have more clarity on this.
Yeah, meanwhile, we're watching case counts as well. You know, is Omicron, is it going to start dropping off like we've seen in other places? And Anna, meanwhile, it's not like remote schooling works great for all parents either.
No, you know, just the women in my own personal community. I'm not a mother myself, but I really feel and hear the strain on these mothers who are kind of having to make a spreadsheet daily just to figure out who's going where and what's happening and what their work is requiring or not requiring. Big employers out here, like the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, are considering having their whole workforce back in the buildings in a month or so. And that is thousands and thousands of workers. It's our Boeing, perhaps you could say. It's one of our largest employers. And so that just creates even more stress on some of these people who have been at least having the work from home option to deal with school up and downs. Even my own family in Pierce County, My sister-in-law is a teacher, and she has 3 little girls. And, one of her girls' schools closed down. So she had to find emergency childcare for that child while she taught at a school and had her 2 others going to school. That's a lot on a daily basis to handle for these women, especially who are taking on a lot of the childcare. I know dads do a lot too, but I'm hearing mostly from my women friends.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, the Washington State Hospital Association is saying this is the worst off they've been since the pandemic started. At Newport Hospital near Spokane, this is Christina Wager saying it's not just the public getting sick.
We have a lot of sick employees, so they're out. We have a lot of people who are just burned out. I think the term is emotional exhaustion. We are all, from our lab to environmental services to our front desk to our nurses, very tired of what we're seeing. And here we go with another peak.
Hospitals are saying, don't go to the ER, please, just because you tested positive. Hospitals are crowded with patients who don't really need hospital care. Hospitals canceling non-urgent procedures and surgeries. Governor Inslee ordered a 4-week pause on elective surgeries and non-urgent procedures. The governor is deploying 100 members of the National Guard, sending them to hospitals, 4 hospitals at least, from Everett to Spokane. Guard members will set up new testing sites outside hospitals in Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, Richland. And the governor is also calling on retired healthcare workers to come back temporarily to help with testing and COVID vaccinations. Anything more to say on our first story this week here on Week in Review, talking about the state of the pandemic, our schools, et cetera?
I think in the employment climate that we're in, employers who are being a little bit more relaxed about when you come in, when you go to work, when, what days you take off during a week, that kind of thing. They're succeeding at attracting and retaining workers where others are perhaps not. And for one example, I talked to a winemaker who also has a big vineyard down toward Walla Walla this morning. And he said that's one of the things that they've been able to attract workers is just by saying to these mothers or other people that are their workers, if you need to come in at 10 o'clock in the morning, that's fine with us. Work your hours a little later in the day so you can get all those kids to the different schools and activities they need to go to. So I thought that was interesting that employers are actually using this to their advantage.
Yeah,
You're listening. Yes, go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just going to say, yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people are in need of support from all directions right now, especially with everything else kind of pulling them in all directions. And I think also going back to Chase's point earlier, I think that it's kind of yet to be seen where this evolution is going to go with Omicron and schooling. I was having a conversation with a parent earlier this week who his friend goes to Lake Washington School District. Their kid obviously is remote learning. He's literally right next door in a community that isn't remote. So he thinks, especially with, a lot of the interaction that happens with school sports across different districts, that it kind of makes sense to not just go school by school, but maybe surrounding districts as well.
Mm-hmm. That's Jennifer Lee from Fox 13, and you're listening to Week in Review. We've got Chase Burns here from The Stranger. We have Anna King, Northwest News Network and KUOW correspondent. You're listening. You could also be watching the show because we're live streaming it on YouTube and Facebook. And we're going to take a short break and continue with more of the news of the week. We will talk the little ball and the lower net, and we'll talk about the wet snow and where are the onions and more when Week in Review comes right back. Don't go away.
It's 20 minutes past 12 o'clock. We're glad to have you with us this afternoon.
We often define racism as an attitude or a character defect, but that can make it an unsolvable problem.
There's no saliva test to be like, you're 45% racist, so now you definitely got to go to the re-education center.
How to address the problem by focusing less on what people think and more on what they do this week on Hidden Brain from NPR.
Always fascinating. Hidden Brain tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Mostly cloudy skies in the forecast for today and tomorrow. Highs both days in the upper 40s. A low tonight around 38 degrees. And there's a small chance of rain on Sunday. Highs near 46. Let's get back to Week in Review with Bill Radke and his guests.
Good job tuning in for Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke with KUOW and Northwest News Network's Anna King, Fox 13 reporter Jennifer Lee, and Stranger editor Chase Burns. We're covering the big news of the week, including the proposal in the legislature to make pickleball our official state sport since it was invented on Bainbridge Island. In case you don't know, pickleball is played on a badminton-sized court, the net slightly lower than a tennis net. You use paddles instead of rackets. The ball is like a more durable wiffle ball, and it doesn't involve a lot of exercise. You don't really have to get very sweaty in pickleball. This is the sound of the 2021 men's doubles pickleball championship contenders. They're hitting the ball quite softly. These are known as dink rallies.
We're going to see a lot of these dink rallies, especially these cross-court dink rallies between Colin Johns and Adam Stone. And obviously we call it dink, something that bounces in the kitchen or is close to the kitchen.
I do like my sports close to the kitchen, Chase. Do you think the legislature will make pickleball our state sport, or is it just too divisive?
Look,
are we as gridlocked as a champion dink rally?
I don't know. We have a short session. It's only 60 days, but I do expect that this is going to happen, if only because yesterday when the governor did his press conference, he showed up like 30 minutes late. And then right at the top, I guess to apologize his lateness, he jumped in by talking about pickleball. And he was like, I just want to say I'm all in for making pickleball the state sport. And I have heard from so many people this echoed. So I guess that I would expect that this is not that difficult of a debate. That being said, I really couldn't tell you what pickleball is, but you informed me very well. I've been asking people about it. I learned that it was like, it's named after a dog named Pickle. And that's a little confusing to me because I was sort of like, should we call it Pickles Ball? Because pickleball makes you think it's a pickle ball, but it was a dog's ball. There's a lot of questions I have about pickleball.
It's Bill, like daylight savings time all over again. Is it Pickles Ball?
Whose ball is it?
Whose ball is it? Whose ball is it? Jennifer, Anna, are you champion pickleball players? Have you taken up?
Definitely not, but I am in support of it. I was actually really pleasantly surprised to learn that it was a sport that was created here in Washington State. Love it here. And, this actually made me love Washington State even more. So, and it's also pretty impressive because, having moved around, I lived in New York State, Connecticut, it's so popular. And someone has told me before, it's the fastest growing sport in America. Mm-hmm. And an acquaintance of mine is actually a professional pickleball player. So definitely like very far removed, but I see her social media posts and she's also sponsored by Wilson Pickleball. So, I mean, it's huge.
It's a thing, Anna.
Can we get like some horseback pickleball going on here? Like some kind of, like I think that could be entertaining, they're little. They have to have the reins in one hand and their little ball hitter thing in the other hand. I don't know.
Kind of a polo mashup. I like it.
Yeah.
California and Hawaii have surfing. Minnesota has ice hockey. Alaska has dog mushing. Wyoming has rodeo. Maryland's official sport is jousting. Colorado's, I would have thought would be skiing, but Colorado's official state sport is pack burro racing, a little bit closer to Anna's concept. So I guess skiing is actually still open for us. We could do pickleball or skiing or perhaps avalanche control, which is what I want to talk about next. Maybe our sport is mountain snow removal, because this week our mountain passes finally became passable. We've had this wet snow that is heavy and is prone to avalanche.
It's not all light and fluffy. I mean, you had to smack it like 12 times. It was like trying to break up somebody's hard-packed snowball.
The
town's maintenance superintendent says about 2 feet of snow buried their small town.
Yeah, we've been busy. There's everybody, it's a little community driven. Everybody's working to get through, storms like that. We don't see storms like that all the time.
That report from Fox 13's Jennifer Lee. Jennifer, you went to, I think it was Index on Highway 2.
It was Index and it was beautiful. And I think everyone who lives up in that direction knows that, and it's why they live there. But even for them, they were impressed by the snow because it just kept coming and coming. And like you said, it was just very hard packed, really difficult to remove. And a lot of the towns needed extra help, like Leavenworth.
Right. Who did you meet that really stayed with you, Jennifer?
I think really everyone, because everyone was just so positive about it. They had such a good, spirit and resilience about them through the weather. And I think they understood that, this was something that they had to deal with, and they chose to live there. But, even the 2 people that you just heard from, such characters, next door neighbors, and, it's just a small town feel. And that gentleman you just heard from, he's a maintenance supervisor in Index, but also works up at Stevens Pass, the ski resort. So everything is just so interconnected in that direction.
Yeah, the folks in Index and Leavenworth could not get over Stevens Pass. Snoqualmie, White Pass blew it, all got cut off at some point. I-5 was closed because of flooding around Chehalis. Anna, I was going to visit you in Richland, but I would have had to go west across Asia and Europe and through LaGuardia, and I just couldn't do that. It was quite we were a stranded region.
Yeah, it was really intense. I had several couples of friends that were stuck in Seattle or Tacoma. One was visiting their son who's like in his 20s, and it was kind of cute. Like you could tell, like it's great to have mom and dad for like a week, but like week 2, like.
Mm-hmm. By the way, we complain here in the Puget Sound area of being underprepared for snow. You were saying some Eastern Washington towns don't have enough equipment for what happened.
Yeah, for instance, like here in the Tri-Cities in Kennewick, Pasco, and Richland, we only get normally like 7-8 inches of rain a year. That so when you think about a snowstorm that can bring like 4 or 5 inches, we're just not ready for it. We have like a couple plows, and they do sometimes the major roads, but I was surprised even days after that snow event, our major causeways were still really junked up with snow. And it was really slick. They would ice up, especially at night. And so it would just be like a skating rink. There was many, many accidents here.
Chase, we were mentioning skiing earlier. That's been a sore spot lately.
Yeah, Gregory Scruggs in the Seattle Times had a good feature out this week about all the issues happening at Stevens Pass and how the pass hasn't been able to open up a lot of their trails, and how you have a lot of people, something like almost 40,000 people have signed this change.org petition asking for refunds because they spent all this money on these passes that the resort had sent out, and they aren't able to access a lot of aspects of the resort. And in his report, Scruggs was saying how he was skiing around and it was like a ghost town up there. And then there's a lot of issues that pop up out of that, where there's a staffing issue, which we're seeing. It's kind of the through line of today's show. There's staffing issues all over. And there's a staffing issue at Stevens Pass. So they can't open up a lot of the stuff. And a lot of that has to do with the rising costs of living in that area, and also the wages that they're offering. A lot of people are complaining that the wages aren't high enough to meet the rising costs of living. And so you just have this really complicated issue. And to make it kind of more complicated, the pass is run by Vail, what's it called? Vail Resorts.
Vail Resort out of Colorado.
And so I was thinking a lot about, cancellations again this week because we're starting to see them, and how in March 2020, we had all these cancellations, and a lot of people were saying like, hey, if you can, don't ask for a refund because a lot of these businesses are struggling. And in that time, a lot of people who had the means were able to do that, and they weren't asking for refunds because they liked the venue or they liked the artist. But in this instance, I think with Vail Resorts, them being an out-of-state corporation that just announced that they have like something over like $1 billion on hand, that goodwill is not necessarily extended. And so you have a lot of skiers and snowboarders who are pretty upset at Stevens Pass.
Yeah, I've heard people say Stevens Pass understaffs their resort. It reminds me of the way people talk about it, like airlines, where they're trying to be lean and mean. So which just makes for longer lift lines and rental lines and all that kind of stuff. Can't speak to that personally, but I've heard the complaint. And I wonder, I thought of you, Anna, Anna King is with us from Richland. Whenever now, especially since the drought and the fires, I'm always partly monitoring rainfall and snowpack and thinking, is this great news yet for farmers and fire danger, or too early to say that, you think?
Yeah, I just checked out the the federal drought monitor this morning, and I was kind of curious to see, like, did this snowfall kind of tip us over the precipice as far as not being in drought anymore? And it really hasn't. The total snowfall is great, and that is great in the mountains as it really helps, but the precipitation, especially in some of the lowland southeastern Washington areas, is still not enough to get us out of severe drought. And so what I think about sometimes is when we can have this snow cover and it melts right in spring, right before the cheatgrass grows, is that we can have a bumper cheatgrass crop, which creates a carpet of fuel across the West and can be very, very harsh if we do have drought conditions or drier summer conditions. It grows really heavy, it gets really tall, and then it dries out like hay across the landscape. And if you light a match on that stuff, it's all very fine material and it can just blow up. So I don't know, snow is like great. I like it in the mountains, but I'm always thinking about what does this mean down the road for fire season. The other thing I thought was really interesting, Bill, was that WashDOT, put out a Facebook message.
State Transportation Department, for those who don't know WashDOT. Yes.
Yeah, they put out a Facebook message just a day or so ago, and they said that deer and elk are actually using where they have plowed the roads and where they have plowed on the sides of the roads as trails because the snow is so deep in the mountains. They're having trouble traveling. And I think that is scary because if you're a motorist and you're going over the pass, there's going to be a lot more deer and elk toward the roadway than normal. And this is actually a problem over in Southeast Oregon as well, where they have put grasses in the medians and in the areas alongside the roads that mature at a different rate than the natural grasses in the habitat. And so the elk and deer are attracted towards the roadway. That's an unfortunate instance, but they planted miles and miles of these types of grasses. So I've seen that before, and I think it's real dangerous to have those animals kind of interacting with the roadways at a higher rate.
Yeah, totally agree. And, just a few days ago, I made the trip with one of our photojournalists up through Snoqualmie Pass, Blewett Highway to Leavenworth. And we were really nervous. We weren't sure what to expect. Obviously, both of those highways were back open, but we were going very slow. I'd say 35 to 40-ish. And at that point, I think there were just less drivers on the road, period, in those areas, which was helpful. But I agree with you. I mean, if, there's deer or elk, or once, higher traffic resumes, it's going to be pretty scary. But I did hear also from the mayor of Leavenworth, with these milder days that we're having now, it's a much needed break as long as it's not extreme melt, which it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So that's good news for, some of those cities and towns that were impacted.
I heard the mayor of Leavenworth interviewed on KUOW, actually our new daily noon local program, Soundside, and the mayor said that they've been doing a lot of business because some of the lower pandemic travel has meant lower attendance for some big tourist destinations. But in Washington state, it means, well, I'm going to drive to the beautiful mountains instead of flying out to wherever. And they've had a lot of people. If you haven't heard Soundside, by the way, you can listen to that Monday through Thursday at noon right here on KUOW or wherever you get your podcasts. Final thing about if we're going to talk about snow and the passes, we got to talk about onions and potatoes. Did you all notice the stuck? It's like it's part snow. I'm sure it's part labor, it's part supply. But did anybody notice some empty grocery store shelves this week?
I was over at a grocery store, I won't name which one, and I noticed, because I wanted to go get chicken breast, there was absolutely none. I think all that was left were chicken drumsticks, no thighs. It was like totally ghost town in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we tried to get a lemon a couple days ago and we're having a hard time. And a lot of other items like milk even has been a problem. I'm lactose intolerant, so that was even worse. Like people were raiding the lactose intolerant milk when all the regular milk ran out.
Hey, stay away from our area. You've got
it was down to like the weird oat milks that nobody wants,
Chase, what were you making your potato onion soup out of?
I feel like I'm just, I have to confess, maybe not a very good cook, or maybe I don't cook that much because I live right in the center of Seattle. And so I don't really do like big grocery hauls. I kind of just like go to the grocery store every day and pick something up. And so I have not been having problems, but it might also just be because I am a bad cook. So I'm not looking for like a specific potato. And maybe I just am grabbing whichever, maybe I'm the people taking the milk because I'm like, okay, I'll just take the almond milk today.
It's a white liquid. I'll take it. All right. It's you. You're the one. That's Chase Burns, editor at Gourmet Magazine. Oh, wait. No, I'm sorry. The stranger. Chase is the stranger. Jennifer Lee is at Fox 13, Anna King with KUOW and Northwest News Network. And we're on Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. You can live stream. You can watch the show on YouTube or Facebook. In any case, we're going to be right back with more Week in Review after a short break.
It's 12:39 on KUOW 94.9, Seattle's NPR news station.
Support for KUOW comes from Village Theater, welcoming theater goers back in 2022, presenting Songs for a New World from composer Jason Robert Brown, January 12th through March 13th at Village Theater in Issaquah and Everett. Tickets at villagetheater.org.
Sami, host of BBC NewsHour. Coming up today are rising tensions between Russia and the West, bringing Finland closer to joining NATO. And the British Prime Minister's office apologises to the Queen for holding parties on the eve of her husband's funeral.
BBC World News coming up in about 20 minutes at 1 o'clock. Let's get back to Bill Radke and his guests on Week in Review.
I'm Bill Radke. Great to have you along here for Week in Review. My guests are Fox 13 reporter Jennifer Lee, Northwest News Network correspondent Anna King, and stranger editor Chase Burns. We're going to talk about some arts news in just a moment. But a moment ago, we were talking about the snow and the passes and the supply shortages and getting back and forth between Eastern and Western Washington. And I just realized that we didn't mention something, Anna, that you had told me about that I hadn't really considered, is that winemaking, not just grapes, but the whole winemaking ecosystem is dealing with some stuff. I wondered if you could just fill us in with that.
Yeah, this is where I just want to be like, no, not my pandemic wine. No,
So-
I'm just
so
kidding.
it's
but
not just the non-lactose milk, but you're also wine is close to your heart.
I know. Well, so the problem is that they are out of glass in many cases, so they can't get the bottles that they're trying to make their wines be put into. And when you can't get the right bottle, it sets off this chain reaction of effects that really can screw up the whole process. If you can't get the wine out of the tanks and into the bottles, then you don't have any room for the new wine coming down the line in the new year. You also don't have the right screw caps or corks or tin closures, because those all are very particular sizes. So if you have a different size bottle, none of that stuff works. And so if you have to order all those things, it can just get your whole timing schedule way off. And of course, you can't put wine in a bottle and then not cork it right away, or it would not hold up very well. And so you just can't have these things being delivered late. And in the large scheme of things, you know, this could really wreak havoc on small boutique wineries that just need maybe like 100 cases of glass. They are at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to like being able to get purchase all this glass. And then the other problem is large winemakers, they're not able to get maybe the volume that they need. So like a Chateau Ste. Michelle perhaps would have trouble getting maybe all their volume, even though they're at the top of the heap for priority, they need a lot of glass. And I talked to Chateau Ste. Michelle yesterday, and they said, you know, it's really tough. They're not having as many problems with the glass, but they are having some difficulties with trucking. They have the glass, they know where the glass is, but can they get the glass to the doors of their winery where they need to do the work? And can they get those bottles back out to the grocery stores, restaurants, and other locations across the world that they want to sell those bottles?
And why is there a glass and bottle shortage?
So most of the glass comes from China, and then a large portion of glass comes from Mexico. And both of those countries, with tariffs and with trucking shortages and with COVID, have been under strain and shipping problems getting it across the ocean. That's been a lot of problems to get it here. And then the other interesting thing was that a lot of US companies have actually been retooling their operations while the pandemic was going on, but it was kind of ill-timed because there really wasn't a downward motion of wine drinking in the pandemic. And people want their wine, they just want it at the grocery store, maybe not at a restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I love your reporting. Thanks for filling us in, Anna King, Northwest News Network and KUOW. Okay, let's continue on the Weekend Review, talking about some of the big news of the week. This week, the trailer came out for the new Steven Soderbergh, Zoe Kravitz movie filmed in Seattle. An agoraphobic tech worker discovers recorded evidence of a violent crime, but is met with resistance when she tries to report it. Seeking justice, she must now do the thing she fears the most. She must leave her apartment.
I'm a voice stream interpreter. I may have heard a crime on one of the streams.
The devices pick up lots of things. Mark this degraded audio and delete it.
I am not capable, and you know it. I think a woman might need help. How do I find out who she is?
And why is this big news of the week? Well, if you're a Zoe Kravitz and Steven Soderbergh fan, there's that. But also Chase Burns, there is a proposal in the state legislature this week to get more movies filmed here. And yet I remember there was a rumor that the production team for this movie supposedly swept a Pioneer Square homeless encampment so they could shoot the film. Was that true?
We heard that rumor too over last summer when they were filming, and we reached out to a few different places to try to verify it. We talked to the crew and they said they didn't do it, and then we talked to the city and they said that it didn't happen. So, and we tried to find some people who might have witnessed it or experienced it, and we couldn't find it. So I think as of now that is a rumor, but there were people certainly saw that production sort of popping up all around the city because they were filming right downtown by Westlake Park, and they were filming these big scenes that I think one of the things that's really funny is it was supposed to be rainy, and it was this like rare time that was like really, really sunny in Seattle. So they were like spraying down the streets to try to make them look wet.
So the non-rain caused a weather delay in the production of the film. They were shooting a big protest scene, right?
Yes, because the part of the movie, I'm not exactly sure about the plot, but part of it is that the city council in this movie creates some sort of ordinance that moves homeless people. And so they're protesting that ordinance. And Zoe Kravitz, being an agoraphobe, has to sort of like run around the crowd, and it creates a certain type of tension. So you have a lot of scenes of Zoe Kravitz kind of dodging around Westlake Park, and she has this look that I think is so pandemic era, because she has this like grown out blue hair and this like trench coat with a hoodie, and she looks like disheveled but also very stylish, which I relate to. No, I'm just kidding.
Continue with blue hair, Chase.
Yeah. But on the bills that are passing through the Senate and the House, Washington State famously has this sort of very weak motion picture competitiveness program compared to its neighbors in the South and to the North. And so a lot of the times when people want to shoot something that's supposed to be set in Seattle, they'll go to Portland or they'll go to Vancouver, British Columbia, because those governments offer more incentives than our state does. And so we have a pool of money that goes out to certain qualifying films that spend a certain amount of in-state money, and it's around like $3.5 million, and that gets drained really quickly every single year. And so a lot of filmmakers will talk about how that's one of the main reasons why it's so hard to get things filmed in Seattle lately. And so what a real bipartisan group of legislators are presenting is different sets of legislation that would ramp up that pool of money from 3.5 million to either 20 million or 25 million. And the $25 million bill is from a Republican, and it has a certain amount of money that would have to go towards rural communities. So like 6.5 million of that would have to be spent on films that are set around the state. And it's really not just a Seattle thing. Spokane has a really active filmmaking community as well. And so when you talk to filmmakers from like the mid 2000s, when this competitiveness program really got going, they talk about it sort of like turning on a switch, and that suddenly there were all of these jobs for local crews and local filmmakers, and that they were able to, in a lot of cases, be able to sustain year-round work in the filmmaking industry in the state. And so the hope is that by bumping it up substantially to 20 million or 25 million, we would just see a real flood of filmmaking within and across the state.
Anna King's over in Richland, and I'm trying to think if I've seen a movie set in Spokane or filmed in Spokane or set in Eastern Washington.
There's actually a film that I'm working a story on. I'm not going to scoop myself, but
okay.
Yeah. One of my best friends.
It's a film that's in production now, and we don't know about it. Oh, okay, well, tune in. Go ahead, Anna.
But then one of my best friends is a filmmaker in Spokane and is working on a larger project that'll be out in a couple of years. But I think it's really important work. I think it's great for our state to be seen in the kind of texture of what is happening out there. So many films are in California and in New York and larger cities. I really want to see some more rural films and some more films that encapsulate the beauty of our state.
Beautiful state. Jennifer, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say last year, there are many Netflix shows that I watched, but a couple of them that come to mind were Made and Firefly Lane, which, absolutely loved watching them. But on that note, I was like feeling super proud, like, oh my goodness, this takes place in like the Seattle area or, some of the islands. And, just being interested, did some Google research, and, most of them were actually filmed in Vancouver, which I can't say that I'm like shattered by it, but maybe, a little duped a little bit. And I feel like there's so much like beauty in our state, and it has so much to offer. I definitely can see the benefit of, just opening the doors to having more filming done here.
Chase, another arts note this week, the music director of the Seattle Symphony quit, saying he felt threatened. What's that about?
Yeah, so the Seattle Symphony had this music director up until this week called Thomas Dausgaard. He started in 2019, right before the pandemic happened, and he's Danish. So when the pandemic happened, he had to go back. I believe he lives in Copenhagen. And so there was this sort of very strained relationship that developed between him and the Seattle Symphony. And there were some accusations that were made in the New York Times where he said he felt threatened and he felt unsafe. It was a little vague. They didn't really explain what that meant, if that was like physically unsafe or unsafe because of COVID. I mean, I imagine if I'm a European looking at America's COVID protocols, I would also feel unsafe, but it wasn't clarified about what that meant. And the symphony denied those allegations. And when you look into it, it just seems like they had a very strained relationship, in large part because of the pandemic. He came back finally last November and then left after a week, citing an illness. And we're seeing symphonies lose their music directors across the country, actually, in a lot of different cities. So in many ways, it's a good time to be a music director because there are many symphonies looking for one. But the Seattle Symphony is suddenly without a head. They have people coming in and filling in an interim position, but they will certainly be looking for a new music director soon.
Mm-hmm. And one more arts news story I wanted to shout out to, and this maybe is more interesting to people who've lived here a long time as myself, but Bumbershoot has new leadership. This is the annual Labor Day Arts Festival at Seattle Center, and they're changing things up. Can you summarize that, Chase?
Yeah, so Bumbershoot hasn't happened since 2019, and that's when AEG ran it. And they ran into a lot of issues in 2019. People who've been to Bumbershoot the past couple of years could talk on and on about the issues, but they ended up letting go of their contract, and Bumbershoot's been in limbo largely because of the pandemic. But there's a new group of producers that's coming in, and they're all familiar Seattle faces. The producing team is called New Rising Sun, which is a Jimi Hendrix reference. And it's composed of Steve Severin, who's from Numos in Capitol Hill, Greg Lundgren, who runs Museum of Museums nearby on First Hill, and Joe Paganelli, who is a concert promoter. And so the three of them are taking over the festival. We don't know a lot about what it's going to look like, but we can kind of imagine based on their track records. So Steve Severin, being a part of Numos, has had a long history with Capitol Hill Block Party, and Greg Lundgren, for Museum of Museums, it's a relatively new museum, but something that they're really amazing at is they can create really kind of fantastic exhibitions in tiny spaces. So in that museum, there's a little theater called the Charles Murday Theater. He's a writer at The Stranger, and it's a 3-seat theater. And it's in a little hallway, and they play just little movies. And I've walked by that theater a lot, and people love it because it's just so surprising to sort of be like, oh, there's this tiny little theater. So I would expect that private showing, except the walkway is in front of the seats. So there's this weird kind of tension. But I would expect the new Bumbershoot will probably be a little bit like Numos meets Museum of Museums. But again, it remains to be seen because they were just announced as the producing team. It's not going to happen this summer. It'll happen next summer. So we have a bit of time to figure out what that will look like, hopefully. And it sounds like it will be cheaper because a big complaint with Bumbershoot was the rising prices in the last couple of years.
Right. Jennifer, are you a Bumbershoot attender, or is it? It was a big thing a long time ago, and I've been here a long time. We were a smaller city, and it was a big, it was a big deal on your yearly arts calendar. But yeah.
No, I've personally never attended, but when I first moved to the area, it was actually one of my first assignments. So I just remember being very impressed by, the size and interest. I feel like a lot of the people that I did meet were, young people from all across the state. So I felt like it was definitely a destination event. And, it's unfortunate to hear about, just in general, how the arts have been impacted the past couple of years. So hoping that it'll be, a strong new beginning next summer.
Anna King, are there Eastern Washington versions of Bumbershoot or the Memorial Day Fest is completely left my head. Folklife, our big sort of big the big Megillah of the yearly arts calendar over there?
I mean, you definitely have the Gorge, a little thing called the Gorge over here. So we have been seeing a lot of people go to some like country music festivals over here. There's one called like Watershed, and there's a couple other different long weekend type festivals at the Gorge that have been drawing a lot of people. This interestingly goes back to my thing about wildfires. I don't want to diss, like a lot of concert venues, but I'm just saying if you had to get a lot of people out of the Gorge really fast, the experts say not going to be happening real good. So that was, I don't know, don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but it's always on my mind when I go to the Gorge in the summer. And then the other thing is just that there's a festival here called Tumbleweed, and that is all folklife, and it's usually a lot of the events are free. There are some concerts that you do have to pay for, but if you like folk music or singer-songwriter type music, it's just a wonderful event, and that has been going on here. So if you're looking for a ticket out of town, that's a good one.
How are the egress avenues there? How are the exits? Tumbleweed, you got me thinking.
There's many exits, and the parking lot doesn't back up too bad, so it's a little bit easier than the Gorge. Yeah.
Hey, we are nearing the end of another week in review, and I always like to make a little time because sometimes the news, believe it or not, is not that jolly. And so I always want to make time to see if anything happened this week that made you smile, made you feel hopeful.
I'll start. So definitely, just being able to visit Leavenworth, and even though they were under a, winter storm disaster recovery effort, just still seeing the positive energy and the kind attitude of the people who live there. And also the stunning postcard look of the Bavarian village was awesome. And then I actually am going to add a quick second one because I've been doing mask research, and someone commented about your mask, Bill, on Facebook. I just saw.
What did they say?
N95, right?
Yes, it is. And my kids don't like to wear these because they call them duck bills. If I put that down now, but I say put it up. If I turn to the side here on the live stream, you see that? My kids hate that. That is not cool. Well,
that is the mask that I'm like now in the hunt for. So seeing you wear it, it kind of made my day today.
Oh, well, thank you for the first compliment I've gotten on my duck bill. And let's talk. I'll be happy to share some with you. Anything else smile worthy, team?
Go ahead, Chase.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I've been watching the show RuPaul's Drag Race. It's been on for now 14 seasons, but we have a local drag queen named Bosco who's on, and it's the first time that we've had a Seattle queen on in a few years. We have a history. We won once with Jinx Monsoon, but the show just started last week. So if you haven't watched yet, it's going to be on for many weeks, so you can catch up and watch a local performer who's still performing every week in Capitol Hill.
Go Bosco. Just a few seconds left. Anna, what made you smile?
I hiked up Candy Mountain for the first time in 2 years. I had COVID and a long COVID case. And so it's been a wrestle back to life here for me. But going up that little mountain was amazing. And there were all these puddles of water that had froze and then refroze and then refroze again. And so they looked like little prisms with these little triangle shaped crystals all in them. And it was just so lovely to see the sagebrush bare and with the lichen at their trunks that looked like light brights. It was just so gorgeous going up there on a winter's day.
That is just where I want to leave it, because what a beautiful image to go out on. Anna King, Northwest News Network. And we've also got Jennifer Lee from Fox 13 and Chase Burns from The Stranger. Thank you so much for being Week in Review this week. Great to see you.
Thanks,
for
Phil.
having us.
One evening, as
Week
the sun went
by
down,
produced by Sarah Leibovitz and Kevin Kniestead, social media and live streaming by Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Tio Popescu. I'm Bill Radke. See you next week.
I'm headed for a land